Good afternoon, students. So today we begin with the impact of green revolution. There was a huge impact of green revolution. First, subsistence farming gave way to commercial farming. That means there was a big switch from food crops to cash crops. As a result of which, the income of the farmer increased. Second, intensive agriculture was being practiced because of this, and that led to self-sufficiency in food grains. And green revolution led to more employment in the agricultural sector. The next impact was increase in the returns due to greater agricultural inputs. And the last impact was increase in rural prosperity. Then there were some people who also criticized green revolution because not only did it have a positive impact, it had some ill effects also. For example, due to overuse of fertilizers and pesticides, there was land degradation. And the second negative impact was that because of overusage of groundwater, it led to drying of aquifers and vanishing biodiversity. Beside the Green Revolution, there were other reforms which were carried out by the government. The first reform was opening up of agricultural universities, veterinary services, animal breeding centers, horticulture development, and research and development in meteorology and weather forecast, which led to forecast of the weather conditions. That means the farmers were told when they were supposed to sow the crops depending upon the rainfall conditions. Then Indian Council for Agricultural Research was set up, which carried out research, and also it led to the development of high yielding variety seeds and the kind of fertilizers that were being utilized. And then another important thing was setting up of Kisan call centers. So in these Kisan call centers, the agents which worked in these Kisan call centers, they gave advice to the farmers about what kind of crops they were to cultivate in their piece of land, what kind of irrigation facilities were they to use. Apart from this, there were certain other reforms, like there were land reforms. Zamindari system was completely abolished, intermediaries were abolished, and land was acquired by the government and it was given to the tenants. So there was a direct relationship between the government and the tenants. So the condition of the tenants improved. The next reform was consolidation of fragmented agricultural land holdings. So this led to prevention of subdivision and fragmentation of land, and when the consolidated land holdings were cultivated, that led to a higher income to the farmers. Then another reform was creation of irrigation infrastructure, especially modern means of irrigation were used like drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, and farmers' participation in irrigation water systems also led to a dramatic increase in the production of the crops. And both surface and groundwater was used in an integrated manner. Then another important reform was fixing minimum support price. Now what exactly is minimum support price? Now minimum support price is the price announced by the government. Before the harvest of the crop, the government announces that it is going to buy the crops from the farmers at a particular price before the harvest of the crop. So this benefits the farmers. He gets adequate returns for his crops. Then subsidy was provided to the farmers on fertilizers. Now I've been using this term very frequently, subsidy. Now what exactly is subsidy? The farmers are not able to buy fertilizers because of a very high market price. And so what the government does is that the part of that market price is paid by the government. So the farmer gets fertilizers at a lower rate than the market price. Then soil testing laboratories were set up. So the farmers were able to get their soil tested, and accordingly they were told to take remedial measures, which fertilizers to be used, which insecticides to be used, which biofertilizers to be used. Then another thing that was done by the government is the government came up with the National Agricultural Policy. Now, what is the objective of this National Agricultural Policy? National Agricultural Policy seeks to promote technically sound, economically viable, and environmentally non-degrading and socially acceptable use of country's natural resources to promote sustainable development of agriculture. Now, it has some salient features, and there are about 10 features mentioned in the book. So, we need not learn all. We need to learn about 4 features, and I suggest the ones which you can learn easily, learn those features. But I'm going to tell you all the features. The first feature was that it emphasized on increasing the annual growth rate to over 4% in the agricultural sector. Second, there was a need to encourage private sector participation in the form of contract farming and land leasing. Then, wider coverage of future markets to minimize price fluctuations and to diversify agriculture, that is, beside cultivating land, impetus was to be given to animal husbandry, poultry farming, aquaculture, etc. Then, plant varieties were to be protected through legislation, and new location specific, economically viable, improved varieties of agriculture and horticulture crops were to be developed, and restriction on movement of agricultural commodities were to be removed. So, a state which has a shortage of a certain grain could be provided grains from another state, since there was no restriction in the movement of agricultural commodities. Then, review of tax structures in favor of the farmers. Then, institutionalization of farm credit. Now, what do I mean by institutionalization of farm credit? Earlier, credit was provided to the farmers at a very high rate of interest, and because of which the farmers were debt ridden. So banks were opened for the farmers, rural banks were opened, which provided a loan to the farmers to buy agricultural inputs like fertilizers, seeds, also to set up tube wells at a very low rate of interest. Then priority was to be given to rural electrification, and the National Agricultural Insurance Scheme to cover every aspect of agriculture. So these are some of the salient features of the National Agricultural Policy. Then coming to the next topic, that is types of farming. So in India, we have about almost 8 types of farming that we indulge in. But the main reason is why we have these different types of farming in different regions. The main reason for this is that India is a very huge country. It has a vast size, and there are different climatic patterns in the different parts of our country, and the geographical conditions, the soil, etc. also varies from place to place, and hence we have these different types of farming. The first farming type is subsistence farming. Now, subsistence farming is carried out by farmers on a small piece of land where he uses primitive tools, and he is so poor that he cannot use any fertilizers or high yielding variety seeds, and neither does he have any means of irrigation, so he is completely relying on rainfall. Hence the yield is very low, and whatever is produced is consumed by the farmer and his family. He has very little surplus to be sold in the market, so main concentration here is on the food crops. And this kind of farming is again, it has very bad impact on the land, because the farmer is not using any fertilizers to increase the fertility. The next type of farming is commercial farming. Now this system of agriculture involves cultivation of crops for sale, that is mainly cash crops are grown. And the salient features of this kind of farming is, first of all, the crops are grown mainly for sale. Then the farms are very large, and mechanized farming is practiced. Machines are used. Then the farmers, they are growing crops which are mainly for the market. So this subsistence farming is practiced in some of the tribal regions of Madhya Pradesh, and the commercial farming is carried out in the states of Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, and Andhra Pradesh. Then moving on to the next type of farming, that is shifting agriculture, and I'm sure everybody is aware of shifting cultivation or shifting agriculture, which also is also known as slash and burn method. It's also called zooming in certain areas. It's a primitive type of agriculture where a patch of forest is cleared. The trees are uprooted, they're felled, and then ultimately the land is set on fire. And the clear patch is then cultivated for a few years until the fertility of the soil is reduced, and then the farmer moves to a fresh piece of land, and the entire process is repeated. And this type of farming again is completely dependent on monsoon, and no fertilizers are used, and it is very bad for the environment. And one more thing I want to add here is that why the farmer burns the land. Reason being, first of all, it helps in clearing up all the stumps, and second thing is that this ash which is produced as a result of burning, this is a very rich source of potash. At the same time, it has a detrimental effect on the land. It accelerates soil erosion, and it causes floods and silting in the lower reaches of the riverine floodplains. Then the crops which are grown mainly are the dry paddy, buckwheat. Buckwheat is the kuttu ka atta that we use. Then maize, millets, vegetables, and some root crops are grown like yams and tapioca, and the yield here is very, very low. And they have mentioned a few names, the traditional names used in different states, like Jhoom in Assam, then it's called Ponam in Kerala, Poddu in Andhra Pradesh, and there are many other names. Then the government is trying to put a break on this practice, and what is it doing? It's promoting intercropping. Now what is intercropping? Intercropping is, instead of making the farmers indulge in shifting cultivation, on the same piece of land the farmer grows two crops, and almost these crops are grown together, and one crop has shallow roots and the other one has deep roots, so that these two crops do not fight for nutrition and space. So this is intercropping. Then another farming technique is intensive farming, which is now being practiced. Now some of the salient features of intensive farming is that the farmers, they own small pieces of land, and lot of large inputs of manual labor, fertilizers, manures is put into the land, and this is mainly done in those areas where population is very dense. So the fertility restore the fertility, lots of fertilizers are used, and the result is that the per hectare yield is very, very high. And they also give a lot of importance to irrigation, and this is mainly done in the northern part of India and in the coastal areas of South India. And the main features are small farms, and more than one crop is cultivated on the same field, so crop rotation is done. Then to increase the output, manure is used, and it's a labor intensive system. That means we do not use much of machines, we use more of human labor. Then we move on to the next type of farming, that is extensive farming. Now in this type of farming, farms are very large, and there's crop specialization. Then machines are used, and farmer mainly grows one or two commercial crops. It's a highly capital intensive farming. Crop yield is very high, but the per hectare yield is very low, because in between certain parts of land, they are left fallow, means they're not cultivated, so that the farm or that piece of land regain its fertility. Then lots of fertilizers are used, pesticides are used, and the per hectare yield is low, but the total yield of the land is very, very high. Moving on to the next type of farming, that is plantation farming. And in plantation farming, plantations are large tracts of land where mainly monoculture is done. Monoculture means giving importance to one crop. One main crop is grown like tea, coffee, and this kind of plantation. It was actually it's a it was brought to, or this kind of cultivation was brought to India by the Europeans, mainly the Britishers, and it is being done in the northeastern hills and in the south Indian hills, and mainly crops like tea, coffee, rubber are cultivated in the states of Kerala, Karnataka, and lots of chemical fertilizers are used, and commercial crops are mainly grown for sale, and in order a lot of capital investment is required here, and latest technology is used. Moving on to the next type, that is mixed farming.